We're going to get started here. Welcome to the November 7th, 2017 regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
President Mason.
Present.
Vice President Andrews.
Present.
Director Lassane.
Present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Wenta.
Present.
Student Representative Parikh.
Present.
Student Representative Pollock.
Thank you. Our first order of business tonight is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Cohn, would you please introduce tonight's agenda?
Consistent with the plans established at your 2017 Summer Planning Workshop, tonight's agenda contains several elements related to both the district's strategic plan and the board's annual goals. This evening, there's a segment for routine business. There is one for board comments, a segment for the superintendent's report, one for strategic progress monitoring, a segment for information items, a segment for new business, and a segment for upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda to you, we have made the following changes. Item 8.1, Superintendent's Report will be updated during the meeting as is customary for our regular meetings. Item 11.1, the fiscal outlook for 2017 through 2022, and item 11.2, replacement educational programs and operations levy for 2018 were updated. The PowerPoint presentations were uploaded prior to the meeting and were adjusted. The board may elect to change the order of business by a majority vote of the members. In no other respects have we altered the agenda, so we ask your approval of the agenda as presented to you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Director Mitchell and seconded by Director Wenta. Is there any discussion regarding tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we will move to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion carries. That brings us to section 5.0, recognition, and tonight there are no recognitions. So we move to section 6.0, public comments. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members in the public meetings. Dr. Cohen, are there any requests for comments this evening?
There are none.
Okay. Then we will move to 7.0, the consent agenda. Will you please introduce tonight's consent agenda?
The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items. These include, for example, meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, and recurring contracts. Sometimes the consent agenda will include items that occur less frequently, but are of a routine business nature. The less frequently occurring consent agenda items are usually reviewed by the board in its Friday report, one or more weeks before the board meeting when those items are scheduled to appear on the consent agenda. This gives directors time to ask staff questions about those items or to consider a discussion about the policy implications of a particular item. If a consent agenda item is removed by the concurrence of two directors, that item is placed in new business and we automatically renumber the remaining items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion, and by their nature, consent agendas are not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office has received no questions or comments regarding any of the items. Therefore, the consent agenda is presented as published, and we ask your approval thereof.
Thank you. A motion to adopt the consent agenda is in order.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. It has been moved by Director Lassane and seconded by Director Mitchell. Would any director wish to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in new business section of the agenda? Hearing none, we move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion carries. Okay, that brings us to section 8.0, board comments. This is a time where directors and student representatives have an opportunity to share information or comments about their activities or items related to the district business. And I think I'm going to start all the way to my left this evening. Student Representative Parikh, do you have any items to share tonight? No. You don't want to talk about your TEDx talk? Just give us a little insight what it was like. And
Yeah, so as some of you know, I had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk this last Saturday at Kamiak High School as part of the TEDx Noah Libraries event. And I won't give away the content of my talk in case you might want to see it yourself when it's uploaded. But I will let you know that a major focus point is from when I took the Intro to Science and Engineering Research class in my freshman year at Jackson, and how I share how important that class was to shaping my interests and my activities in high school. Yeah.
Wow.
excellent. Thank you. Director Wenta.
I appreciate Druvic's appetizer that he provided there. That was great. I had the opportunity to have our board conversation at Garfield Elementary last week, and I really appreciate the new format. I think there was much more robust discussion when it came to the dialogue with the parents. I think there's certainly the parents who were there were very engaged and very receptive to the work of the district and what was going on. They understood the issues, and the parents who were there last year. So it was helpful to see. There were some new faces, but it was helpful to see that conversation continue. I have another board conversation coming up at Whittier this Thursday. So,
Right.
But overall, it was wonderful.
I had the opportunity to sit in on a discussion with our superintendent of public instruction at the that was held at the PUD auditorium on the 25th of October. And I must say it was very interesting, educational and informative, but I still believe there are still some unknowns as far as how we will fare with I guess you would say, the process that we have to go through with fully funding education. There's still quite a lot of unknowns, and I look forward to when they can come up with modifications or amendments to some of the changes that they foresee down the road that will hopefully benefit all students.
Over the past couple of weeks, I attended board breakfasts at Sequoia and Hawthorne. Both visits were both rewarding and heartwarming. The parents there are just so appreciative and grateful of the services that Everett Public Schools provide to their students. Terms from Sequoia were things such as, they were a lifesaver or a blessing, or they're just truly, truly appreciative. Excuse me. At both schools, the parents were excited about the signature STEM programs to be offered, and were supportive of them. Their concern was that the programs would be available to your student would be able to choose whatever program they wanted rather than be required to attend the one at their neighborhood school. And then also something that came out of the Sequoia conversation was a real desire to have an alternative middle school. So very good conversations. And I agree with Ted. I liked the new format. I think it was really informative for the parents to learn more about our district and how it is more than just their school, that it's this long, narrow, widely diverse district.
Well, I too had the opportunity, along with Director Lassane, to attend the 38th Democrat invitation to Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reichdahl, and listen to him. And I do, it instilled great confidence in me to hear his perspective on many educational issues and topics. I believe that he has a good insight into the work that needs to be done. Obviously, he's representing 295 districts, so it might not exactly mirror what we have, but do believe that he's on the right track with many of his initiatives. So that was good to hear in person. And then I have my first board breakfast at Madison tomorrow. I have yet to have one, so I'm a little jealous. Mine just got scheduled later, so I'll look forward to that in the morning.
Okay, so I have a few things. First off, I'm very thankful for the PTA Council to have made us up a list of all the schools, so we only have to write one check if you would like to join multiple schools' PTAs. So I have given that to each of you, or you can just join one PTA. But this way you're not writing 27 or more checks depending on the PTA. So that was something nice that they provided. The second thing is that I was able to go up to the WASDA regional meeting last week in Bellingham. There were probably 30 superintendents and school directors at the meeting. I was the most south, as you can imagine. But there were some interesting things. So Chris Rectal was there, spoke the same things that you have mentioned, just the uncertainty with the financing, talking about the fact that we have operations levies going up in February, which is 18. The new levy naming isn't supposed to be until 19, but some prosecutors are confused. That there is a Foster Pepper white paper that, Jeff, I'm assuming you and Dr. Cohn know about naming of levies and bonds. This Foster Pepper white paper, they kept mentioning it. I'm presuming you all know that. But something that was really interesting is that the self-assessment that we do for WASDA, that Gary and Debbie and Darlene nag us to make sure we do before our board retreat, we are the only state in the country that does that. And it's the way that we use it to set our board goals. And they have statistically significant evidence that boards that use the self-assessment and set board goals actually have higher student outcomes. And so there is a direct correlation. And so WASDA is a way to not raise our dues, has started selling it to other states. And so there's a Utah or Colorado group that is working on it too, to start to get some statistical significance around boards' impacts on student achievement. And then my last thing is that I had a breakfast that I had an opposite experience of you all. I think I had too much presentation and not enough conversation. So I hope that our associate and assistant superintendents can make sure their principals are aware of time. That the principal did give about a 35-minute presentation, which I could have done a better job about not answering questions and deferring to, oh my gosh, Larry, for follow-up, which would have given more time, but I wasn't even able to give the board presentation, which is the different stuff. The school stuff is important, different stuff about the district. Larry was able to stay later for the parents that could stay, but I hope as I go forward and as we continue to go forwards, that we are given, and the community members that are there are given the time to communicate to us, and we are able to show the district information. So just some feedback that was different from what you all had, just that, they're all gonna have their own flavor, but just if there can be some more guidance for the staff, I think, I don't know.
Has your experience, since I haven't had one, I'm gonna rely on you, has your experience been that it's heavy on presentation and not enough opportunity for real robust conversation, or has it been a good balance, or what is your?
Well, the first one that I did attend, it went much further over the 1 hour, but that was only because the parents had a lot that they wanted to ask questions about. And so since that was the first one, it had to then be modified, or, we learned from that experience for the follow-on ones. But I thought it went very well, because I'm grateful I had the opportunity to hear what the parents and the community members had to say. We did get the opportunity to provide the district information, but what I did like about it was the fact that, we got a lot of responses back from the parent group.
So you didn't feel yours was heavy on presentation?
No, I didn't think it was. It may have been, but I didn't think it was. But what I did like is that the feedback from the parents groups was that, why are we waiting until now to do all these changes?
Yeah.
We should have done them long before. So that was a positive feel for me. that, you know, that they really wanted and appreciated the changes looking forward.
I would say there is a lot of content. There's no question about that. It's great content, and I think people liked seeing it, not only about their local school, but also about the district. I think that was really helpful. I think we were able to share the message, if it were. And I did find myself at times saying, okay, we're going to keep going. So it's being mindful of that, I think.
Good guidance for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's difficult to have the full presentations and the conversations in an hour time frame, but I think all the information is very helpful and useful. So I think you just plan on a little bit of extra, more than an hour, if you want to.
Oh, yeah. To be honest, more than an hour.
Yeah. And is that okay with staff? And, I mean, it sounds like parents are willing to stay. It's just a matter of, yeah.
I had some parents that needed to leave, but it left enough of a group, I think, and then I needed to leave. But the other thing was, Pam, the big thing, that, especially because I was at a South End school, one of the questions came up about why can't we build it so that they'll come? And I had to educate that the state doesn't let us do that. And that was I think that was a good thing, to just have that sort of conversation about why is this school so overcrowded? Why are these schools so overcrowded? Why don't we just build it? Because we know the houses are coming. And so that was an interesting conversation.
It does. I think there's an opportunity, both with these breakfasts and I provided this feedback to Dr. Stewart today, to maybe tailor these presentations, the PTAs and the board breakfasts, to accommodate some of the concerns of the South End parents in particular. You know, there's some conversation now about boundary changes. And, you know, parents get anxious about this, and when they have a director in front of them, they want to ask questions. And then also better understanding mitigation fees and how those don't cover the costs of schools, even though there's a lot of new homes in their area.
I was going to say that the impact fees, there was once a slide that we did, communications, I think Mary did a slide up for impact fees and what it does cover and what it does not cover. But we need to perhaps for the South End schools put that in so people have an idea of how much their impact fees cover or don't cover.
Or if it's not a slide, at least have it as we have the data, because
have it available.
Yeah, because that was it was a question, but it would have been helpful if I had I knew a story, but I didn't have the data.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Thank you, Caroline, for
some
allowing me.
feedback, I guess, as we travel down that road. Okay. Well, that brings us to the superintendent's report. What do you have for us tonight, Dr. Cole?
Oh, I think I've got a couple of fun things this evening. So let's start out with the title slide. And this is a picture of Monique Bean, and she is the principal at Garfield Elementary School. And Garfield is our 2017 School of Distinction this year. We're very, very proud of them. Excuse me. Remember, the School of Distinction is an award that identifies those schools that are in the top 5% of growth in performance over the last 5 years. So we're delighted that we have another School of Distinction in the pool this year. There just aren't very many across the state of Washington. We received a $90,000 grant from the Boeing Company. It is aimed at early learning, and we've been working on kindergarten readiness fairly intensely for the last 6 years or so. We've had a partnership with a variety of other districts, some child care providers in our region, and this grant from Boeing enables us to really zero in on math readiness with increased focus on 4 areas of our pre-K work. And we're going to provide you some additional information about that. It, by the way, augments a $107,000 commitment that the district's made in budget to this work. This will accelerate connections and access and training and partnerships for pre-K students. I want you to know that our special education department, the entire special ed program, was once again rated 1 on a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. Each fall, the special ed departments in districts around the state receive a notice. Its official name from OSPI is the Annual Determination Letter. The notice verifies how well districts have met the requirements of special ed law for students aged 3 to 21. And districts need to meet standards in about 18 different areas. I'm not going to go into those with you tonight. You'll get a copy of all this business in your Friday report. The district has earned a 1 rating in 7 of the 8 years that the rating system has existed. The one off year was a 2. And we're very, very proud of their good work. I wanted to let you know that we have a School Psychologist of the Year for 2017. Robin Arnold is that individual. She serves the psych department as a lead, and she supports primarily Lowell and Forest View. This is an annual award issued by the State Association for School Psychologists, and you're going to see her, I believe, at your November 21st meeting, where we'll tell you a lot more about Robin, and you'll be able to shake her hand. We'll get a picture and otherwise honor her recognition. We received a phone call from the College Board. They're going to officially announce in December that we're one of 4 districts, we understand, in the state that has made their honor roll this year. Districts that increase AP student enrollment and maintain high scores of students taking the test are listed on that honor roll. The last time for us was in 2011. I want to call out the work that we've done as well with Equal Opportunity Schools. They've been great partners in this work as we've zeroed out the discrepancy in demographic makeup of our AP classes compared to our high school's demographics. And this is a significant part of the effort in which we've invested in the AP coursework and offerings for students. I want you to know that Music for Life has donated now 116 instruments to the district. This is after about a year of working in our district. The Seattle-based nonprofit receives instruments from folks who no longer want them. They refurbish them, and then they gift them so that students who cannot afford instruments are able to have an instrument. And I will tell you that the piano, that small grand piano that you now see in the atrium here, was also a gift from the Music for Life folks. And so they want to provide lots of opportunities for students to play, and I want to tell you that kids really, really appreciate receiving instruments from this program. At some point, we may be able to get a little bit of a program for you from Music for Life. I suspect that very shortly you'll see a news spot, because there was a station out at North yesterday, and they were videoing the kids and Emily and doing a story on Music for Life. So we're really very, very excited about that. Good news about the district app. At this point, we have recorded 3,584 downloads. That's not bad for 20,000 parents. Our goal is 4,500 by June. I suspect that we'll get there fairly easily. The app's available on iTunes and in the Google Play app stores, so folks who download it can customize it to choose schools that they want to connect with, and they can receive information about grades and test scores and bus route information and library items checked out and attendance and class schedules. And I think there's even a way to be able to add to your students' lunch account, which is pretty good news. So I want to thank all the folks who worked on that and draw your attention to the success we're experiencing there. I want to congratulate all of you as a 2017 Board of Distinction. This is your 3rd recognition in 4 years. And frankly, if we'd known we could have done it every year, it would be your 4th recognition in 4 years. I understand that this year there were 22 districts that were named Boards of Distinction. There were more that applied, and you will have an opportunity to be recognized at the state conference. Although I wouldn't hold your breath. As much as we love you, I think they like to share around the Board of the Year award. So, but you're in the running. I mean, once you make District of Distinction, you could once again be Board of the Year. We'll see how that unfolds. Well, you know, it's that time of year when we submit our graduation rate data, and I want you to know that we have, for our part, we have closed the books on this past school year. What I have in front of you is what we put on our charts and what we put on the website, what we share with folks. This was the 2016 and 2015 data, 90.9 and 94.7. And I want to let you know that the new numbers that we've turned into the state are a 4-year graduation rate for the class of 2017. Remember, superintendents round up, so it's 93% as far as we're concerned. It's a 92.9 rate, and that's I think about a 2% increase. We're very, very excited, very, very pleased about that. And I also want you to know that the 5-year rate went up to 95.2, and that was for the class of 2016. It will take a number of months for OSPI to gather all that, publish it, and for us to be able to calculate or receive this in Snohomish County and the state rates. I want you to know that this year, and I don't know if it's for the first time or not, I think it's the first time in my 8 years of experience here, the highest comprehensive high school graduation rate this year was Everett High School with a 97.1 rate. They rose 3.1%. We're very proud of them. And I want you to know that Cascade was just nipping at their heels with a 95.5 rate for the 4-year, and Jackson was 95.2. On the 5-year rate, the number 1 rate was Jackson High School at 99.0%. They were up 0.6%. Followed by Cascade at 96.8 and Everett High at 96.7. Sequoia High School, our alternative high school, their 4-year, you'll recall that rate goes up and down a bit. The 4-year rate is up 17% this year to 56.5, and the 5-year rate fell a little bit down to 63.3. I'll tell you what, that's incredible performance for an alternative high school, and I want to thank everyone who has helped students achieve at those levels. So that's, we think, particularly good news, and I think shortly we'll be putting out a very self-congratulatory news release. Yes, I did text the governor because I know he wants to use those numbers whenever he can. All right, next item, board breakfast conversations. You're involved in that process. You've just spoken about those. So other than reminding folks who happen to look at the superintendent's report, which we know is incredibly popular within the district, I won't spend any more time on that. Fall Tech training has been underway. We're getting ready for that next one-to-one stair step up. We've held 11 classes. Last spring and summer, every teacher in this fall's one-to-one training took part in sessions to prep them for each student having a device in their classrooms. We're doing the same this year. For this one-to-one rollout, the next schools in line are Jackson and Cascade High Schools, Cedarwood, Whittier, and Jackson Elementary Schools. I think you're a little bit familiar with the training. You're going to get another installment of it in the winter. And we have, by the way, you and I talked a little bit about the two of you, I think, spoke with me about the possibility of adjusting some of our board special meeting topics. And that one's a little bit difficult to move because it's timed when Jeff is doing something for parents, and I believe you're able to be part of that in some fashion. So that one's a little bit more difficult to move. So we'll have to talk more about what other adjustments we might be able to make. You've asked for some construction updates. Want you to know that we're involved, deeply involved right now in the safety projects that were funded by the 2016 capital levy. Cedarwood, Mill Creek, Penny Creek, Silver Furrows schools that were built during the 80s and 90s, similar formats in those schools. Before we really experienced in this country the horrors of these attacks on schools, each was built with a very open and welcoming entryway, and we're needing to change that a little bit. So today's modification of that old design, you'll recall that we had a design and we put it out to bid, and the costs came in way above our architect's estimates, which we aren't used to, frankly. Part of that has to do, we think, of course, with the construction environment today where costs are rising so rapidly and construction bidders are very difficult to come by. There was one bidder. The team went back, sort of revisited the approach, and this is it. And this modification of that design incorporates an electric gate, which has a video monitoring, video intercom system, not unlike those used in apartment condominium complexes. And eventually these gates are going to have card readers as we are able to upgrade the technology, the infrastructure in each of our schools. So we want to make sure that we thank voters for supporting that capital levy, and we want to make sure that folks know that these enhancements, along with so many other capital projects, are underway. Now, we wanted you to know that the new turf at Cascade High School is expected to be complete by the end of November. That was not a bond or capital levy project that we fund with dollars from the state's School Construction Assistance Program. And we're looking forward to that being done. AquaSox are looking forward to this is actually not the AquaSox baseball field makeover. This is the Memorial Stadium baseball field makeover. But we know that the AquaSox are very excited about this. This particular makeover, moving fully to turf, was approved by the Major League. And they contributed $300,000 on top of the dollars that were already in the account for upgrades that they've contributed over the last several years. The district's investing about $1 million, and the county is investing the county investment's around $300,000 as well. We want you to know that we've got all kinds of great quotes from the county executive, Brian Sullivan, Councilman Ryan, who's helped out. We're gonna make sure that you see some of the comments that they've shared with us. They're very, very pleased to be a part of this this community investment project. School visits, largely related to high school and beyond, a variety of visits. Governor's office, Northwest Regional Representative visited, and I've met with some ASB officers, attended some football games. And I want you to know that the unofficial count for high school and beyond was about 1,500 at Everett, about 1,500 at Cascade, about 2,000 or so at Jackson, which we think is up considerably from the previous year, as well as a new event at Heatherwood, which drew about 400 people. So we think we're very safe in telling you that the high school and beyond attendance rose from somewhere around 4,500 or so to above 5,000. So we think it rose from maybe 3-ish to 4-ish to up to above 5. So we're very, very excited about that, and look forward to more of those activities. And at some point, I think we're going to have Dana sneak in a little bit of a conversation we had with Boeing exec today related to high school beyond and that sort of work. All right, that's it for the superintendent's report this evening. Thank you very much. Well, she's going to do a little bit later.
Okay.
When we talk bond and bond projects.
Okay. Thank you very much. We may have to extend the time for your report with all the good news that's happening.
We'll make it shorter next.
Well, I don't know if it keeps up like this. And I'm trying to remain neutral with those graduation rates, but that is such good news. That is really good news. And I'm going to the PTA meeting tomorrow night and might have to say something. Okay, that takes us to section 10.0, strategic progress monitoring, and I believe Dr. Scott and his team are going to walk us through the latest instructional materials overview and adoption schedule.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. We look forward to this every year, and this is our annual overview, a forecasting really of the instructional materials adoptions that you will be ultimately determining and their relative cost structure over 5 years. So that's our purpose tonight, really, is to look at adoption needs and really focus on those drivers that drive home or reinforce the need that we believe in the timing, really, of these substantive investments that you'll make on our behalf. And then establish a common understanding of potential financial impacts across those 5 years, and then outline next steps. So this is the strategic goal set, and you've seen that. The KPOs really focus on the teaching and learning category, a little bit on resource management, which is no surprise. I'd like to spend a little time in a set before I introduce the team here in looking at critical considerations when adopting materials. And these should be familiar to you in the sense that we've got the number one piece there, and that's by no accident. It's really a non-negotiable, and these materials that we select must be aligned to standards, Common Core standards, next generation science standards. This is incredibly important, must have it. And as we mentioned before, not every instructional materials on the market are created equal, and some purport to be standards aligned, and we found that that's really not the case. So it takes some extra special vetting to ensure that what we're getting is truly standards aligned. That's number one. Preparing kids for college career life readiness with 21st century skills, being able to draw out those 21st century skills in kids. Those materials should really facilitate the practicing of skills, giving kids venue to be able to practice those 21st century skills and be a vehicle to get them there. Materials should also lead to common outcomes across like courses. They should take into account the diversity of learning styles and modalities using multimedia tools and other digital resources. They should be compatible with the technology tools that we currently have and those that we're continuing to invest in, so that our devices should enhance and transform or draw out those deeper learning opportunities with our students. We are lucky in this district to have a policy and procedure set that is extremely robust and faithful to ensuring anti-bias, cultural relevance, digital citizenship, appropriate uses of technology, effective uses of technology. For example, teaching kids explicitly how to vet the infinite number of resources at their fingertips through the one-to-one environment, or just even in the cart that belongs in the room in a non-one-to-one environment yet. But being able to be discriminate with vet the credibility of online sources, for example. Accessibility for special student populations, and then importantly that we're budgeting for comprehensive professional development, not only in the initial stages, but in year one and beyond. So our process for vetting and recommending and ultimately and you approving as a board is really anchored in our core values of equity, collaboration, that continuous improvement process, promoting a distinguished level of teaching. That's the TPEP connection, where kids are really taking ownership of their learning. That's the distinguishing factor in that level 4 in our Danielson framework. Then, of course, technology integration, which we'll hear more about later. So pleased to announce this lineup, and we've got quite a team. We've got Kathy Stillwell, our Director of K-12 Math, discussing our upcoming math adoptions. We've got Andrea Cartwright, our Director of K-12 Science, discussing some really, really exciting advancements in course development. We've got Dana Riley-Black, who will be giving us an overview of what those two will share. We've got Georgia Lindquist, our Director of Secondary Literacy, talking in humanities, reviewing social studies, world language. I'm going to do the piece on health and fitness because it's short. And then we've got Becky Clifford rounding that out. So I'm going to hand off to Dana at this point.
Good evening. Recently, you've heard a fair amount about the work of the STEM team, from internships to CTSOs, and of course the development of our high school STEM signature programs. However, the backbone of our pre-K-12 STEM program is strong teachers and instruction, as well as strong standards-aligned instructional materials. And so here today are two of the directors from the STEM team who will talk with us about mathematics as well as science and engineering adoptions. I'm pleased to introduce Kathy Stillwell, who is our Director for Mathematics. And Kathy will first overview our upcoming mathematics adoptions. And then Andrea Cartwright, who is our Director for Science and Engineering, will overview our upcoming science and engineering adoptions aligned to the next generation science standards.
Thanks. So this slide depicts an overview of the mathematics adoption timeline and costs. This year we are reviewing the core middle school course materials for implementation next year. When we originally adopted the middle school math materials, it was shortly after the launch of the Common Core state standards. And since then, math instructional materials have advanced. So we believe that the new materials will not only better align to the Common Core, but also better support our focus on the balanced math instructional models that we shared with you the October 6th study session. So the left side of this graphic depicts the current instruction in many of our classrooms in mathematics. And as we continue to shift to the balanced math model and adopt these new materials, we will support instruction to align to what's described on the right side, which is aligned to the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics 8 mathematics teaching practices. So we're moving from the traditional kind of sit and get to a more interactive, engaging, rigorous mathematics that ensures success for each student through targeted and differentiated instruction. And this is our secondary math sequence of pathways. Important to note are the infrastructure that support more students in advanced mathematics courses. So the summer classes shown in the middle there, they offer a chance for students to enter, another chance for students to enter our advanced compacted pathway. So it's a bit of a lane changer, but it's also support for students that were taking compacted during the school year but struggled a bit so that they can stay in that pathway. So both of those supported kids. And also to stay on the pathway. At the high school level, to notice is our two options for algebra. There's intensified algebra, which is a block model for intervention, and the Algebra 1 course. We also offer Algebra 2 support classes, again, giving more students access to advanced courses.
This year, we begin the process of adopting next generation science standard aligned curriculum. This slide depicts the timeline for full adoption for elementary, middle, and high school to acquire NGSS aligned instructional materials. You will remember that the NGSS have 3 dimensions: science and engineering content or disciplinary core ideas, as well as science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. We are seeking material that include these features, as well as curriculum that includes digital resources and alignment to career and technical education or CTE equivalencies. As the new high school science assessment, the Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science, or WCAS, is set to be administered at grade 11, we have convened a high school design team, NGSS design team, comprised of science teachers from each high school to develop grade 9, 10, and 11 science and engineering course maps. The team is analyzing research regarding the standards, equity, and best practices for teaching science and engineering, as well as nationally and locally developed course maps. The course maps the design team develops will include course descriptions and will guide the adoption processes. Once the course maps are complete, we will begin the process of adopting new grade 9 instructional materials. Similar course map work is being done at the elementary and middle levels. Given the work to date, we expect that the high school course maps will include both an AP or advanced placement pathway and a core science and engineering pathway. As we have reviewed the standards against our advanced placement courses, we are pleased to learn that the advanced placement courses are closely aligned to the NGSS. The core science and engineering pathway will include rigorous courses, as well as the opportunity to thread between core courses and AP courses. As the design team considers the high school course options, attention is being given to the possibility of aligning a grade 8 science option for high school credit. I look forward to presenting our plans for continued K-12 transition to the NGSS at a board meeting set in January.
With the upcoming social studies adoption this year, in the years to come, we will complete our K-12 social studies program alignment with social studies standards and the Common Core standards for history and social studies, as well as alignment with best practices, including an inquiry approach to learning. And it will provide our students with the opportunity to have really rich technology integration in their courses and provide the resources for really digging into what these 21st century skills mean in the social sciences, particularly the 21st century skill of citizenship. Also to note that the psychology adoption process will complete our social studies adoptions at the secondary level by providing that last social science elective, which is a foundational course that we think will encourage even more students to access and be successful in our AP Psychology course. World languages adoptions over the next several years will also provide us with the opportunity to continue our work to ensure that at graduation, our students have the knowledge and skills in world languages and comparative cultures so that they will be very proficient in their 21st century skill of citizenship, particularly global citizenship. With this year, our Spanish adoption will be what we will be doing in the other adoptions in French and German in the following year, and that is to focus on aligning with the world readiness standards for world language learning, and also with best practices, and provide rich resources for those key communication standards in the world language standards. And also really rich cultural resources, just similar to what we have with this Chinese adoption this year, which is so really fantastic. Then we turn the spotlight on the arts, and we have brand new art standards adopted by the state of Washington this year that align with national art standards. So by having these adoption processes, we will have an opportunity for our arts teachers across theater, music, and visual arts to have materials and resources that truly support them in building rigor and engagement in the arts, and provide digital tools, the 21st century medium for art for our teachers and students, as well as resources that really build those 21st century skills of creativity, critical thinking and critiquing, as well as being able to respond and connect to the world of work and to cultural contexts of artworks. So this will be really exciting for our teachers and students.
I'm representing Robert Polk on this particular slide, and we're considering a secondary health adoption implementation year in 1920. You heard last Wednesday the importance of integration of social emotional learning aspects there. So those things are increasingly intertwined with health and fitness and overall wellness, particularly at the secondary level. So we look forward to this particular implementation.
Three years ago, during the analysis for instructional material adoption forecast, we identified an instructional materials opportunity to improve access to grade level standards and skills for students with special education services. In order to foster alignment to and extension of Common Core state standards, as well as prepare students for college, career, and life readiness, we will be completing supplemental material acquisitions over the next couple of years. While we are collaborating with our curriculum partners to use the core instructional materials, this will allow us to have corresponding materials tailored to meet programmatic and individual student needs. The goal is to support the delivery of specially designed instruction for students in their life readiness skills, as well as functional academic skills to address their IEP transition goals in employment, education, and independent living. During this process, we will engage multiple voices to support the selection and implementation of supplemental materials. And I'll hand it back to Peter.
So this is the estimated lineup of the consumable costs over the next 2 years, and you can see it's running at about $600,000 per year, and it covers a variety of areas. Springboard, in particular, our handwriting curriculum, K-12 math consumable resources, manipulatives, tools, and then our ongoing Science Resource Center materials, some of which are living creatures, which is pretty cool. Lots of fun living creatures. I learned all about snails the last couple nights ago with my 5th graders, so I know that comes from the SRC. So in summary, over the next 5 years, we're looking at almost a $9 million investment in core instructional materials costs. The consumables, as I mentioned, will be in the neighborhood of $600,000 a year. And then these estimates, of course, take into account growth, enrollment growth, inflation, and increased interest in courses in particular content areas. So as we close out this presentation, again, going deeper on those considerations and the opportunities and the unknowns, but I want to emphasize really the opportunities are exciting and the unknowns are really exciting when it comes to matching that leg of the stool that complements the instruction and the relationship between the teacher and the student and the content. The tools matter, and it's that really important leg of the stool. And we're looking for the right opportunities at the right time. Again, trying to make sure that our investments are supporting that standards alignment and supporting the blended learning model that our teachers are learning in some absolutely world-class professional development led by Jeff Utecht. So when we think about the balance of print and digital materials and those cost variables where sometimes in many ways, in counterintuitive ways, that digital materials may or may not offer a cost savings with the onset or the rise, and Brian Beckley knows this very, very well, the rise of subscription costs. So publishers have figured that with moving from, as people move away from print or physical textbook type adoptions and move more into the digital environment, they've figured out that annual subscriptions might be a way to keep those profit margins in place. So we are obviously looking to be good stewards. We have been good stewards. We've been very, very close. These estimates have been close over time. For example, our K-5 ELA adoption last year, the largest of its kind in recent memory, $2.3 million, was within $10,000 total purchase cost. So that's less than 1%. So we're very, very close with our estimates. So we're going to continue to assess those priorities and observe instructional design and delivery methods to capture the momentum and the excitement that one-to-one provides, paying attention to where it makes sense to have that blend of both print and digital, where it might make sense to go 100% digital, and how to phase that in over time thoughtfully. And those really are our next steps, and working closely with Brian and Joanne Budewig and the LMS team, with our folks here who have lots of substantive expertise in course design and marrying those tools, technology tools in particular. So next steps, continuing to work with Cabinet and our respective groups here, continuing to keep our eye on the ball with long-term fiscal planning, and again, monitoring those opportunities that the one-to-one rollouts provide us with digital platforms. So in summary, we've reviewed our long-term adoption plans, at least in the next 5 years, and associated drivers behind those plans. We've shared those financial implications and outlined some key future conversations. So we welcome your questions at this time.
Thank you. Directors, do you have questions for Dr. Scott or any of the other folks who presented? Go ahead.
And I apologize, this may seem like a long-winded question. One of the things I remember at our board retreat, Jeff Utecht talking about how curriculum is increasingly becoming a thing of the past. And he talked about the ability to have curriculum updated in real time, almost like a Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Right? And So the question I have is more, when we look at critical considerations for adopting materials, should we be looking at curriculums that are updated in real time? And is there such a thing? And then a couple follow-up questions were world language, French and German. I'm always intrigued by that. Are there other languages that we're looking at before spending money there? And the 10% annual inflation rate seems a bit high. So
I think
welcome
I've
your
got four.
thoughts.
I think I've got four there.
I apologize.
No, it's okay, and I apologize if, and feel free to, I'm going to jump in and ask you. I'm not sure I caught the second one, but yes, there is such a thing as curriculum that responds in real time. And in fact, in your Friday report, Dr. Cohn offered an article, a brief snippet about a term that is relatively new. I think it's new, and it's called playlists, right? So the idea of computer algorithms determining the next playlist or series of lessons that the individual learner might need to optimize his or her learning. And so that's not unlike some of our programs currently, some of our assessments currently that are computer adaptive in the sense that if a student answers right, the level of complexity goes up if they answer wrong, so they stay in a range. And I think the same philosophy and the algorithms apply to curriculum or lessons that are not teacher independent. I remember distinctly when we developed the strategic plan, and the folks in the room said that while technology is going to grow exponentially, that face-to-face interaction and a lot of that, the aesthetics of actually touching and feeling things aren't going to go away. They're going to be enhanced, and the four walls of the classroom are going to be expanded, figuratively speaking, so that kids can have their learning personalized. That's a long-winded, I think, answer to that first question. So yes, there is such a thing. And I think the second question was, have we considered it? And we're always considering those types of things. I can give you one example of a more progressive, heavy digital set of instructional materials that you've all just adopted, and that was the 612 literacy intervention set. We call it Language Live. It's from Voyager Sopris, and they have some elements there where lessons are tailored down to the individual level. That may be an appendage of what Jeff Utek is talking about. I think the world is trying to figure out how to adapt. The curriculum development world is trying to stay on pace. I would like them to stay on pace with stick with standards and ensure that what they're marketing are standards aligned, because that is one thing that can't be compromised. In world language, you had a question.
And that was, are we looking at other world languages before we necessarily look at a French and German curriculum upgrade?
We have had those conversations. We've moved, obviously, into the Chinese language adoptions. I'm not sure we've taken a deeper dive outside of French and German. There's been some conversation about potentially investing in following demand patterns, and when demand isn't there, that we don't necessarily go out and support materials or FTE that would result in an inefficient way to staff. I don't know if I'm getting at that particular question, but right. I think the short answer is if it meant abandoning those two languages wholesale in lieu of exploring others, we haven't had any serious, deep conversations about that.
And I'm not suggesting abandoning, but I just find it interesting that That would be one. And then the other one was just the 10% annual inflation rate. That just seemed high. And I know it's a forecast, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very thankful for your presentation. It's very informative. Thank you. I'm also very happy to see that under both math and science curriculums that you've presented here, and for some reason my computer won't back up, but maybe it's trying to tell me we should always go forward. But the pathways between the compacted classrooms, you have pathways so that kids can cross over into the next level, because we know in this business that there are so many kids whose the light bulb doesn't come on until much later for some than it does for others. And that ability to be ready and prepared to take the jump into advanced classes is, may come later. And I'm very grateful that you show a crossover path in the math area, as well as the science, when you say that they can always braid in between and out of, say, 11th grade into the AP courses that are available. So I'm glad we're going to be doing something like that. Will they have opportunities in the summer in the science area of taking any types of coursework that might help them braid in between those others if they're not quite prepared, like they do in the math area?
I'll invite Andrea to come up and talk about specifics there. We've offered some jumpstart classes in math. That concept, I don't recall off the top of my head whether we've offered a jumpstart or a kickstart, kind of a pre-teaching module in the summer so that kids, we could better ensure a successful start in the fall. That's something that we can certainly consider.
I'm just wondering, in the science area, we're focusing so much on STEM courses, and we've prepared that for the math area with the summer. My concern is, what about the science area? Are there any crossover classes like what we have offered for middle school math? Are there any crossover courses available for those kids in which the light bulb comes on a little bit later that might help prepare them for the ability to take AP courses in science?
And you're speaking specifically to those opportunities being in the summer, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So those, all of that is under consideration right now, and that's something that the design team, as we continue to flesh out the detail of that core pathway and what makes the most sense for our district, that's a layer of looking that the design team is engaging in. If this is our pathway, what else might we provide as opportunities for students so that they can thread or lane change sooner than later and get the support they need to do that?
Thank you very much. My next question is world language K through 5. What does that look like?
That is a really good question. You'll notice that the implementation years in
We all three had that question.
2021 and 22. So a few years back, it might have been 1 or 2 years, maybe two, actually it was last year, maybe. In our world language plan, we do have a plan to expand K-12 with world language. There are several ways to do it, probably more than several, but there's 2 ways that we're strongly considering. One is very staff dependent, meaning do we have a world language teacher at every building? And kids are getting maybe a deeper and wider experience beyond exposure to language. We've got exposure to language now in K-5, but and we could stay at that level with materials both print and digital. In some ways, the world is our oyster when it comes to exploring those things. I think it's kind of the 2 trains meeting in the middle. We've got a robust set of world language courses at the high school level, an emerging set at the middle school level, and this idea of having the figuratively
weave
speaking,
into it.
Meet. So a complementary, exploratory experience that another option would be to explore dual language or immersion programs at one or more sites.
I think one of the things we're waiting for, frankly, to have a much richer discussion about this is whether or not the state's going to settle on accounting structure for K3 or K5 class size, which could change based on our conversations with legislators that would allow us to employ language teachers at each one of the elementaries and count them into that ratio, which would be an excellent pathway for us. It certainly would relieve some of the pressure on building classrooms. It doesn't achieve the result that the state legislators talk about, which is lowering the actual number of youngsters per general education classroom. Remember, we're currently able to count the specialists. We have a variety of types of specialists who are involved in instruction in the elementaries. This is certainly a way we could achieve that result and add language at the elementary schools. And then you have to get into these questions of options that Peter's talking about. Should it be the same at all the elementary schools? Should you maybe engage in dual language at some? Might you want different languages at different schools, so different feeder patterns have some different languages? We've also spoken at some length, going back to your earlier question, with the folks at Everett Community College about contracting staff to come teach a section of a language or a couple of tiers of a language on our high school campuses. Our association has been very supportive of that sort of an unusual onesie, twosie kind of a thing where you don't have anything close to a full-time, if not even a half-time position, but you want this language and you want this language and you want that language. You've heard me say on a number of occasions, I think at this, the way the world looks today, I think it makes good sense for us to be teaching Chinese and Russian at all of our schools. Because of the size of the number of folks on the continents. But there are also, Joyce and I met for an hour today with a delegation from South Korea, referred to us by the county executive's office, a group of folks who would like us to set up an exchange program with a very specific school system in South Korea for some extended exchanges back and forth with students. That would provide us some opportunity for youngsters who might have some interest to learn some South Korean. Now, that doesn't mean we would offer coursework at all of our schools, but I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about is as we maintain a particular base, which is part of your question, Ted, are there opportunities for what Peter has described as on-demand or sort of micro opportunities for languages where there's a group of youngsters and or parents who would like us to offer that. I think you're seeing that type of response with the language certification assessments that the newspaper covered so nicely and that we've been sharing with you over the past couple of years, where students who know languages are able to receive those credits and that recognition for very sophisticated language skills in languages we don't even offer. So I think as we look at this whole notion of, and I don't know if globalization is the right word, but preparing kids for what is essentially a smaller world today in terms of travel and communication and experiences and linkage and cultural understanding, we really can't approach it in the traditional way.
And my last question, K5 handwriting. What does that include? Let me frame it a little differently. Does it include cursive writing?
Yes, it does. Yep.
Thank you.
Is that still the same trend? Are districts dropping it or continuing to do it, or what's going on in the world of handwriting?
I can't speak to what other. I could find that out for you. I don't have a good sense as to how ubiquitous it is in other districts.
Yeah.
I don't. I know it's still around, and the program that we use is probably the most, well, this would be an anecdotal observation, but probably the most widely used set of materials.
Director Andrews.
I had many of the same questions. But I also had a question on the timing of the K-5 math adoption, which is out in year 2022. And I believe we adopted, the last adoption was in 2013 or thereabouts. But having just had that excellent study session about math and how math skills in early years can be such a predictor of success, academic success in later years, I was just wondering if there was any discussion or thought about moving that adoption up to earlier years, or if we kind of stick with the, I think it's every 10-year refresh.
There has been some conversation. I think you look at the 2.2 million, and we've seen that number and thought, when we try to keep the sum each year in the $1 to $1.5 million range, these are almost standalones in a single year, kind of like what K-5 literacy was last year. I think a brief answer to the current adoption is that there's far less concern about standards misalignment, and there are ample tools associated with them. And I will say the supplemental tools, digital-based tools, you've heard a little bit about iReady pilots, where students are taking benchmark assessments and those assessment results leading to tailored interventions for kids. So the level of and quality of differentiation in a classroom is substantially improved. It's being very well received over 9 schools in our district. So the current K-5 math curriculum in that sense does not stand alone. There are supplements to it and supports. And so it's certainly not on an island. And I think, Director Andrews, the best way to answer the question is that would be the sole very large sum investment in that year, which is why it's out there kind of on a limb, so to speak.
Okay. I did have a question on the Chinese. I was wondering where it was, but that's because I'd forgotten that we just adopted it last year. Do we have it in all of our high schools now?
We do. Jinbang Chinese in all of our high schools?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Director Mitchell, were you finished? I'm sorry. I just have one quick question on the Spanish implementation. Those are all new materials across all classes?
Spanish 1 through 3. So we invested in AP Spanish literature last.
That's already happened.
Last time
yeah,
it has.
But all new materials in terms of a whole new adoption.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of feedback on Spanish, I guess is why.
We have too.
Just want to
We
make
have
sure.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's participation tonight. And with that, we are going to move on to Section 11.0, Information and Discussion. And tonight, Mr. Moore is going to give us our financial outlook.
First of all, I wanted to introduce a couple of guests with us tonight. I think they may be familiar faces. Roy Kogan and Debbie Haskins from Kutak Rock. They're our bond counsel, and I'll introduce them now just so you understand that they're here for the second presentation. But the reason I mention that is that I think in this particular year, if you recall last year when we looked at the fiscal outlook, there were 2 major factors. Will the levy cliff occur, and will the capital levy pass? In this particular budget, we haven't gone down to the granular level in terms of what we saw last year about the appropriations and the expenditures. Instead, you're going to see this is similar to prior presentations because that's such a paramount issue. And also because I think we're ahead of other districts, as Dr. Cohen and I have experienced, in really evaluating what is the implication of Gross Substitute House Bill 2242. So we've had different points in times that we've presented. We've had the legislative update, we've had board retreats. So I'm going to move through this quickly is my point, and you're going to see similarities in the second presentation. So I think if you need me to slow down, I'd rather have that than speed up. So I think we have our standard objectives and performance outcomes. And I just want to mention, this really is structured based upon what we made our request to the legislators, our local legislators who met with us. And we asked for these different requests, and I want to just run through them with you. You're familiar with them, but they all together both represent sort of a legislative update as well as a fiscal outlook. So I think we're all familiar, and you'll see later, with the implications and what the Supreme Court is probably wrestling with as the most significant shortfall is that special education funding wasn't addressed. And I think it was really helpful to show them this diagram because I'm not sure that they understood both here and with 4 of the Big 8 when we met down in Seattle on October 20th, that in essence you have to invest $20,000 before you can even get safety net. So they sort of assume safety net was something that they'll go and adjust the model, but I think they really, their eyes were open that no, we have to put some more funding into this. The question is how much, and the question is the fact that they struggle with the fact that you're just not being efficient. And I think we did a lot of persuasion because the districts there are very efficient. And as you saw, based upon that performance report, congratulations, Becky, that we can substantiate that we're doing the right things and we're doing it effectively. Second, we've talked about K-3 compliance. We know that we lobbied to them to that without classroom space, we're in a pickle here in terms of how we add staff. I think the other component of that came up is just hiring the individuals and getting them in place. The market right now, several other districts explained that they had vacancies that they couldn't fill. Fortunately, we've made the decision to get out early, hire, and I think that's really been a wise move that we should continue to do. We've talked to them about the salary allocation model, and more locally, we explained that, you know, probably when McCleary began, that we had some hope that maybe the outcome would be something that maybe adjusted the balance between labor and management. When in fact, by taking away the salary allocation model and the mix factor, you've really even somewhat since made it more difficult for us by putting it down to the local level with 295 school districts. We requested that they consider that they reinstate that mix factor because districts with more experienced teachers are penalized by less funding, and districts with more, I don't want to say, new teachers or teachers new to the profession are going to get more funding for that. So there's an incentive to create a discrimination when you go out and hire against more experienced educators. Not that that will occur, but there's just a fairness to it. And it was sort of really obvious when they went from the IPD, from the CPI to the IPD, that it was simply a cost-saving measure and that it won't keep up with our salary costs over time. We also, and I think this was an eye-opener for Senator Braun and Representatives, well, the 4 individuals that we met with in Seattle, to get the message across that when you do this plus and minus on how far you're going to lower a levy and how much you're going to increase the state funding, you're counting dollars that don't go to work against the levy. In other words, you're counting funding here. And when you look at this pie chart, what we pointed out to them is the levy right now is not supporting a COLA for all of our staff, or it isn't supporting increased retirement rates. And every one of these cost structures come in, even special education. The new funding is for the COLA and the increased retirement rates and the increased benefits for those staff members. So it's committed, and you should not, you know, on a plus and minus chart says that means therefore we can lower your levy. No, those levy funds are continuing to fund programs that we need here locally. And we use this OSPI diagram just to The message here is just that from now until 2000, I think this was 1920, we end up with a net reduction of 25 million in discretionary revenues, which is about the amount we need above the $1.50 in our levy to stay whole. So everything starts to reconcile, and I think that message was heard well. We reminded them that the public perception was overstated, that while you touted 7.2 billion of investment, in reality it's really 5.6 because you also took away at least 1.6 million in local funding. And I think we found in our messages from our local labor groups that they have the perception too that there's this windfall of new resources when that actually isn't the case. And their members are beginning to believe it and feel the same way. So we have some communication to do as we go forward. We've talked about a little bit about levy enrichment and the enrichment plan at a prior meeting. I just want to be clear that Superintendent Reichdahl, and you've probably read it in the paper, we don't have to turn in an enrichment levy plan, and it would be almost impossible to do so because both OSPI isn't willing to identify additional enrichment activities because it's so nebulous. And so they're collecting what we think it might go to and give it back to the legislature. There is no definition, there's no ability for us to make a plan, so they've deferred even requiring a plan until next fall for the 2019 levy. That means later on, when they finally define what the rules are, we're likely to put a plan together, but now's not the time for a plan moving forward. We've talked before about the inequities of the $1.50 per 1,000 AV versus $2,500 per student. And in this particular example, we showed that and I didn't put it on this slide, but today, because Bellevue has a 34 point, and Bellevue knows that this, we're using them as a comparison, not to criticize Bellevue, but to show the inequities from two districts that have about 20,000 students. So today we've communicated that there is a grandfathered levy there of 34.66 or 43%, and we're at 28. So today, if you looked at the state models of what we're allowed to collect, they can collect about 6.9 million more. Well, you've made it worse because you're capping us at $1.50, and we can only collect $1,500 a student, and they can collect $2,500. That's 20 million more. So you've exacerbated the inequities. And so I think that they've got that message, yet we're still faced with the need to pay employees salaries. So they can have all good intent, and they didn't find basic education, they didn't find a work day. They haven't created any ability for us to work with our educators to say, we need to pay part of your salaries to keep you whole moving forward. So this particular diagram is of what it was like before. We showed the legislature how much of the funding comes from the levy. The next one shows that they achieved, at least in the certificate administrator and the teacher's classification, that 90% goal. But then they're phasing us out from 24% down to 18%, and that's when we begin to duck under. And we're back dependent upon the levy, right where they didn't want us to go. So what we're trying to tell them is that you cut the levy too short. In fact, this diagram here really represents what we estimated, and it took quite a lot of work. I compliment Ruth and Floyd and Karen Buckman and the team for really deciphering what those salary commitments are moving forward. So you can see going across the top, the second year we begin to improve, and that's because they gave us the new salary funding in two steps, one 18-19 and one 19-20. And so when you go across the board, those inherent local costs, and Senator Braun asked, what are you estimating? Over time, if we expect to continue to work with our labor groups at about the same rate, which is about 3.5%, including COLA, this is what it would cost. If you want us to do something lesser, then you didn't give us the tools or the local authority to do so, and it's a bargaining issue. And then you look at special education costs, they begin to dive down for that same reason, only because they're funding more of our salaries, but then that picks up. So if we were to go out for $1,500, you'll find that we will be in the hole. And this slide will be evident when we go to a later picture too. But we also know if they were to lift that and somehow let us collect $2,500, then we're more in a positive circumstance. So as I listen to you talk about instructional materials adoptions and these millions over time, this is the financial picture we need to accomplish that, not the former. So as we move forward, we're going to have more information. And the other thing you'll see in the next presentation as well is we're able to, and you'll find some districts are saying, we're going to do all this with a lower local commitment. They're not addressing the state increase, which is not 82 cents, it's 97 cents. Our model does, and I'll expand upon that further, but I just wanted to give you this quick snapshot and let you know this continues to unfold as we move forward. We have built adequate reserves. So when you looked under the worst model, today I would tell you that I think it's year 3 where we begin to look at significant cuts. It's year 3 because the shortfall in the first year, we have enough fund balance to do that. But now that we are closing the books, we can begin to look at that and provide you more information in the oncoming months. But for today, the key consideration before you tonight at our next presentation is really the need to go out and ask for where we believe that they're going so that we can demonstrate to our community that we're asking them to support solvency within a stable tax rate.
Thank you. That was a lot to digest there. I know we've seen some of it, but it's just ever evolving and updates constantly. So I guess with that, directors, do you have questions? And we can start on the right this time. Director Mitchell, do you have any questions for Mr. Moore?
I will let you know that a lot of those levy slides, the levy portion of this will go into at a little slower pace when we get to the next presentation. So that's a preface.
Question.
Okay.
Do you anticipate any? Yes. So the slide that is right after this one, that talks about the 2018 session. So you do anticipate, or at least what's on mine says 2018 session. Do you anticipate the legislature making any tweaks this year? I mean, I know it's not a budget year, but clarifying some of these things, because at the WASDA meeting, as everyone knows, there are 295 districts that are struggling with their shortfalls, and very few are feeling windfalls. All around this region, there's shortfalls, and so it's sort of how are they dealing with that equity and access, especially because one of the biggest things, it's that regionalization. I don't know if that's impacting us very much, but in some neighboring communities, depending on where the staff lives compared to where the district is, it impacts their funding. But just what are you reading for the tea leaves for what the legislature might do for this coming session?
Well, relative to the, specifically to the $1.50 versus 2,500, I know from WASA and the executive director there that they're really hearing that a lot of the districts rural that are under 1,000 students are really impacted. When you get into the Puget Sound area, it's sort of how it mixes. So you can be right next to Edmonds, and just because their AV is higher than ours relative to what we do, when they started at $1.50, they're going to be around 2,300 or 2,400, and then they're going to fold into the 2,500. AV in and of itself is inequitable no matter where you go. So districts would prefer a dollar per student. Park that for a sec. For Everett, what you'll see is unfortunately $1.50 only generates a little less than 1,500 here, and that's where we have that big gap. Other districts are in that circumstance, and you have to kind of point at them and pick at them. So this is all separate than regionalization. So I think there's an awareness. I think there's a vocalization by the Ds that we have to do something. And I think we were able to demonstrate to a couple of the leading Republicans at the meeting that something needs to be done, because then you have Seattle that needs about 3,500. So they're caught between this, can we make a quick fix? And one of the quick fixes I think we'll see out of the local funding working group is delay implementation to this new formula by 1 year. Give us some time to fix it, because people can't agree. If you said everybody can collect 3,500, then everybody would be whole, but the districts in Eastern Washington are screaming inequity. We can only collect 2,500. We can't ask for more than that. The only way we'll agree is if you bring LEA and bring everybody up to 3,500. Well, that'll be so expensive that the state can't possibly do it. So the common thinking is then I think the best way to do it is say, look, we need to sort this out and come up with a different mechanism. Not sure that there's going to be a lot better, but at least something that holds districts safe. And in the meantime, let's delay not to the 28%, but to the current language they use, to the 24% going forward.
Because they've given us more at the other end or something.
Right, and by then they'll be fully funding on staffing too. So that's sort of in that area.
One hopes.
I'm sorry?
One hopes.
One hopes.
One hopes, okay.
One hopes logic prevails. Regionalization, I think we heard vocalizations from the legislature there that they think they did it okay. I mean, for us, we're benefiting. For Federal Way, they're right next to a district and they're surrounded by it. For Marysville, they're in the same circumstance.
And Bellingham is the same, or the Mount Baker compared to Bellingham.
So from that perspective, that could be one of our vulnerabilities of not going out for a higher levy. What if they lower it down and they start at 18 and all of a sudden we're 6% behind of where we thought we were today? That's one of those reasons why going out for what our proposal is tonight protects us against the unlikely and doesn't make us dependent upon a supplemental levy going forward. So the regionalization, have no idea what would occur. It seems like a long session concept and not a short session concept, because they're only going to be able to tick off 2 or 3 things in 60 days.
Directors, other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay, thank you very much. With that, we're going to take a 15-minute break. Looks like we will reconvene at 6:15.
That time is different.
What?
The timing there is different.
Because my fingers couldn't do both.
That clock is set.
Okay, I think we're going to
The speaker's time.
reconvene here.
That's the whole. Or she did, in this case, she might have just done them at different times.
Okay, we're still on section 11.0, information and discussion, and up next is Jeff Moore with the replacement educational programs and operation levy for 2018.
Thank you. A moment ago, I introduced our bond counsel, Roy Cogan, and he's here only if you have questions about the attached resolution and their specificity. I think it's also important to know that people always often wonder, how does this work? Who does what when it comes to selling bonds? Our bond counsel provides us the legal guidance and oversees the legal documents and creates our resolutions for both bonds and levies, whereas our underwriters and our financial advisors more deal with the debt structure and that sort of work. So not here tonight is Dave Tregeser, who has supported us in looking at how all this taxation kind of fits together, and I think we're on version 12. So so you have those three dynamics. You have the underwriter who helps us sell it and prepare sort of the sale documents, the legal counsel who's our guardian, and then the financial advisor that looks at what happens on the actual sale price day. So as we talk about the expiring levy, one thing that Director Mitchell mentioned is conversations about the word enrichment and how it needs to be in or not in the language. And I think the common concern is that it sounds luxurious or superfluous. It sounds like it's unnecessary. I'll have a drink of water and I can pronounce that word later. Nevertheless, in Snohomish County, there already has been a resolution filed, and Mr. Cogan has confirmed that we do not have nor need the word enrichment in either the body of our language or in the ballot title. So it is provided to you in preliminary state for both bond and levy, and we will be making a few tweaks. I know Mike just today had a couple of questions on the bond resolution, so know that they're in a draft state. Let's see. Don't want to do that. Again, I think you've probably noted our strategic links and our objectives for tonight, and really it is to give you a final look at what our recommendation is and take any feedback if you want us to make adjustments to our proposal. I think, again, I mentioned earlier, you're going to see some redundancy, but when the legislature came out and said everybody's a winner, I think I won't be redundant, but earlier some districts are in a different circumstance, and that we, in fact, are one of those districts that is harmed by the nexus between the $150 per 1,000 and the 2,500 per student. And the thing is about public perception is that we are only requesting a maximum amount from our voters that we can collect in a given year. That is not the amount we will actually collect unless the state authority exceeds that. And right now the state authority is below that. So it's just important to know if we ask for more than this nexus allows us to at this point in time, we're doing it purely under the speculation that the legislature will make the appropriate corrections to remedy all these districts that are harmed. But that it can be anything beyond that is rolled back to our voters, and it's important to know that we've done it in a very thorough way of making sure that we have a stable tax rate. So you can see right here is our, yes?
One of the things I just want to make sure that we're all clear about is the general notion of we collect the lower of what the voters approve or the state allows still stands. Yes. So whichever is the lower of the two, we're still going to collect. We don't just get to go to the higher. Okay. So that history carries forward. That's what Jeff's describing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, just because it's so relevant right now, can you explain rolled back?
Rollback is a term that means oftentimes districts don't formally have to, but when at a point in time when we've asked for a voted authority of let's say 51 million, but we're only able to collect 48 million, we'll bring a resolution to you to formally roll back that assessment. And it's not what actually sets the assessment, but it's more of a formal declaration by resolution that we will not collect those taxes.
Thank you.
Our calendar here, and I think we've talked about this before, is that, and you'll see in a slide later, it puts us in a rock and a hard place because we have to file a resolution by December 15th, and the legislative session doesn't begin until January 9th. And so in order for us to accomplish that need, we have to have your resolution approved on November 21st to make that cycle. We've talked about the inequities and the variances between Bellevue and Everett. It's also true that others are in a less fortunate situation than us, I'm sure in certain circumstances. But nevertheless, we are in this predicament that if we were to move forward with $1.50 per 1,000, as I mentioned in the earlier presentation, I'll try to not keep saying that. I thought it was important for the context of each presentation, although similar, to be in one place for those who look at and want to view our presentation. So we think that with the fund balance that we have built, that our real problems begin in year 3. So if they don't act this session, we have time. We have time to react, and so we're not assuming there would be drastic cuts, but we would look for them to provide some remedies so we can provide some consistency looking forward. And again, I want to point out the regionalization factor down below, that there's only a handful of districts that are grandfathered at the 24%, but we too step down over time. And I think before I've shown you that how that, oops, I think I went the wrong way, how that impacts us, because as they stop funding for, or they lower the salary funding at a rate of 2% a year, at the same time, they're only allowing our salary growth to be the IPD, which is less than 2% a year. We actually move backwards in terms of funding, and that's what increases that dependency on our levy, assuming we keep the same number of staff and we hold them harmless from their personal salaries being reduced. So again, option 1 is to go out and ask our voters only for $1.50. We know that if the legislation were to change, either this year or the following year, the legislature would allow us to go out for a supplemental levy. But to do so in April and August is difficult, as we found historically in 2010. And so more prudently is in our recommendation is option 2, which is increase the requested authority in anticipation of a more favorable legislative outcome. And I think I've already explained the benefits and how the regionalization tapers down. The state tax rate also impacts us. So when we look at what that might look like, we're not seeking the full $2,500 in the first year. What we're trying to do is look at what our local needs are. And you can see that there are a couple of years there where, and this isn't everything we do with a levy, where there may be some investments that may be able to occur, or investments in some programs that don't exist. But if we were to begin a program such as a preschool or something that the levy is intended to do, then we need to have that be sustained over time. And that's why we're seeking this authority. Number 1, to provide us the opportunity for true enrichments, but number 2, to safeguard us against if something happens to this regionalization factor over time, and we actually end up with less funding than what they originally intended. So that is the plan today, and the important thing to understand, and I think you'll see the following diagram that is more prescriptive, is that we, like other districts, can say that we are going to lower your overall tax rate from 586 to 489 over time for the 3 things we ask you to support. We ask you to support educational programs and operations for the general fund. We ask you to support a capital levy for technology and for building improvements, and we ask you to support bond debt. And we're able to do so because we've planned for this in the past. And we're counting on this new state revenue to allow us to do that. At the same time, we're also allowing you to keep the same commitment we told you in 2016 of establishing a rate of 586, including the state increase of 97 cents. So while this is really complex to our community, without question, it sort of demonstrates, and I see some smiles, but it accurately demonstrates what our debt is. And it accurately shows in 2018 that we were still keeping our commitment, but the state doubled up on us, and they added that 90 cents in the last year of our educational programs and operations levy from 2014. So our citizens are going to see a spike. Probably, I think they're going out on Valentine's Day, and they're going to see an increase as a result of the net schools tax. Now, we have nothing to do with a state increase. In fact, the legislature enacted it. It doesn't flow through our system. It goes directly to the state. But we have been able to lower that down to 489. As you can see, moving forward, can say that we committed to our stable tax rate commitment, and what we're asking you to provide for us is not an increase in rate. And that's how this model is structured. And as you can see, we would increase those rates. I'm looking at 2000, I may have an error. I think the 2018 and 19 shouldn't have the student dollar amount. So focus on 2019 moving forward. You can see the levied amount is definitely less than what we're collecting in 18, 44 million, 45, 48, and 53. And it increases as that implicit price, as the regionalization factor tapers down. And we are asking for rates in the range of 209, 201, 210, and 222. And that, again, is less than the 261 we're assessing in 2018. And down below, we added, since our agenda review, this is what the rate would be if we were at the pre-levy cliff, 28%. We'd be up around 290, 288, you can see. And even at the 24%, the post-levy amount, we're still well below what we've done in the past. So we're hoping that through our conversations, you're comfortable that we've right-sized this levy to meet the needs of the district and to protect our financial future. I'll add one more thing. You asked about what districts are doing around us. I've checked with a couple of them. Snohomish hasn't decided yet. Marysville's going out with $1.50, and they would do a supplemental levy if the rules changed. However, they're in a deeper regionalization problem, and so I would just express concern about that direction. But they have to know their community and what they're willing to pass in this environment. Mukilteo is in a state where they're like Edmonds. Both of them are near the $2,500 mark due to their AVs, and so they're not down at $1,500 like us. So if they ask for $1.50, they grow into the $2,500. In fact, I believe Edmonds, Mr. Meyer there told me that they're keeping it at $1.50, so they're actually exceeding the $2,500 in the out years versus the $1.50. North Shore actually is like us. They're going to be around $1.75, and so they are doing exactly what we're proposing to you. They're exceeding them out, and they're asking for $2,500 straight across the board, and it creates a rate that's above what the $1.50 is. So I think there's safety in numbers throughout the state, and in fact, when we were up with Dr. Scott with Chris Reichdahl, we asked if OSPI has any concerns about exceeding the stated 2242 amount, and absolutely not. And I think that Gary would affirm when we were down with the 4 legislators that they confirmed that they're aware that districts are going to be asking above what is authorized right now, because we've always done that. We've always asked for more and rolled back. So the Issaquah situation is unique and kind of perplexing. So with that, I just would ask if you have any questions.
Thank you. I want to thank you and your team for managing through the challenges that this legislative session has left districts with, and the continual changes that you're trying to account for. So with that, directors, are there questions regarding the levy or structure or anything that Mr. Moore can answer?
I just have one statement. If I heard Superintendent Rechtall state that the 1.5 or 2,500, that I think we are going in the right direction, that he kind of is believing, and I'm paraphrasing, but that it should be a range, and that maybe we can make it a range so that districts, as you said, can go for what their community will support, but that, you know, between $1.50 or 2,500, I think we are making the right decision based on our community and what our needs are. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also a point of clarification that is difficult to communicate because it has not always been this way is that we are seeking an amount that is actually acting as a safety cushion to us, but legally we can only collect what the state allows us to collect. So that's a one that I think our community perhaps doesn't fully understand.
And I wouldn't call it a safety cushion. I mean, I look at it.
I guess against legislative changes is what I meant.
That's true, but I think that we're doing, under our fiscal stewardship model, we're asking more or less for what we would need to both hold our entire staff, not to gain ground, but to keep them whole with what they're making today and not be in a position of having less. There is, as I noted, some additional capacity there that could respond to legislative changes, but it could also help with some of these strategic targets that it feels like we'll never get to.
Yeah.
Whether it's early learning, preschool, other elements of our strategic plan, and some of these curriculum adoptions. You could accelerate that math K-5 if this were to come true, seeing that the revenues taper down. So Dr. Scott has sort of laid that out based upon available resources, and
right.
And even then, when you're on the fiscal, you kind of go, don't overpromise because we don't know where we're going to be. But
not to mention early learning and STEM program operations.
Right. Right, and opening new schools with new administrative sets. Those each become a new high school, a new elementary school. You're talking $3 million of overhead right there. So it's not as much of a cushion. If we want more of a cushion, we should go higher. But I think it's a responsible fiscal stewardship commitment that we need to make.
Right, thank you. And so I think no further questions. With that, we will move on to 11.03 capital bond proposal for 2018. And I believe Mr. Darcy Walker is going to step in for Mr. Gunn this evening.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay.
Sorry, Darcy.
Okay, good evening. It's my pleasure to present to you the 2018 capital bond proposal and draft resolution 1164. Tonight's objective is to review the recommendation and draft resolution of a capital bond proposal for placement on the February 13th, 2018 special election ballot. Tonight we'll talk about the growth in our district and the need for a new high school, talk about advice and themes that we've received from our community and staff engagements. We'll go over a list of potential projects for the 2018 capital bond proposal, the planning for a new high school and some STEM pathways, and we'll review draft resolution number 1164. At the end of the presentation, we'll certainly entertain discussion, comments, and questions. Both Mike, myself, and Kelly Smith from Dykeman Architects, she's here as well, to help facilitate those comments and questions. So this is a schedule that shows the bond development process. The star shows us where we are currently. We're here to review the bond and levy resolutions today and hopefully bring back to you on the November 21st board meeting a resolution that you could vote on. Again, we're looking at the February 13th as the election date. This slide shows us where we have been as a district. We've certainly been growing. Over the last 10 years, we've increased by 1,100 students. As you know, we currently have 26 schools. We've got 115 portables across our district. We expect 1,600 more students in the next 10 years. This slide shows that growth again, and again, 1,600 more students. So by 2026, we should be well in excess of 21,000 students. You've seen this chart before as well. It depicts the growth at our elementary, middle, and high schools. And you'll notice that we look at out to 2025 currently, and even beyond that, all indications are that we'll continue to grow. You've seen the slide as well before. I think the big takeaway here is our schools, we're really reaching capacity. In just the next few years, we're looking at 38 portable classrooms by 2026 at Jackson High School and 8 at Cascade High. We currently have 17 portable classrooms at Jackson High. This is a map of the southern portion of the district. Again, we're growing in all regions of the district. We are currently experiencing heavy growth down in the south end of our district. And the red rectangle that you see just to the north of 180th Street, that is the proposed site for the new high school and is the current site for elementary 18 that's deep into design. When Everett High School reached an enrollment of over 2,300 students, Cascade High School was funded and constructed. The same was true for Cascade when it reached a population of 2,300 students or more. Then Jackson High was funded and constructed. And by 2023, we see Jackson's enrollment to be well over 2,400 students. So the need for a high school is pretty well documented. Some of the themes and advice that we received from our staff and community engagements were that there was strong support for a new high school. Some of the other advice we received was to limit the bond to a few items, make it very simple. Some of the themes that we heard about was maintain safety, culture, and good learning environments, good opportunities for students, build schools that were supportive of 21st century skills, including STEM, being very innovative with our facilities. We also heard that we should build interest and support across the district in this bond for a new high school. We were told to build high quality and maintainable schools and consider community use of our schools as well. This slide shows the work that we had you involved with in our last board meeting and prior to that board work session. So these are the projects that are currently on the proposed resolution. You'll recall this totals $319.6 million. It includes a new comprehensive high school with the STEM component, property for elementary 20, 36 classrooms. Again, this is the 36 classrooms. It has 16 permanent classrooms and 20 portable classrooms for K through third grade class size reductions. This includes a modernization of the cafeteria at Everett High, modernization of the Everett High vocational building with a STEM component, Cascade High Science building, including STEM, Cascade High Science or Cascade High cafeteria remodel, Jackson High's STEM signature program, HVAC and controls upgrades at 5 sites, 12 portable classroom HVAC upgrades, and then district-wide electrical system upgrades. This slide shows the preliminary site plan for Comprehensive High School number 4, and above the high school you'll see the current location and site plan for elementary 18. This is a preliminary schedule for high school number 4. We are about to begin the visioning process for that high school and the EdSpec process. We're trying to get a jump ahead of the bond passage so that we can continue to maintain an opening in September of 2022 for that new high school. We've also had our consultants help us understand how this high school would, the cost of this new high school would compare to 8 other high schools that have been constructed in our area. So this proposed high school number 4, is on the same par as, and quality-wise, as North Shore High Schools, or North Shore School District's new high school. We're about $1 per square foot difference from North Shore's high school. We've also had our consultants inflate these costs. Some of these schools, like Marysville, went back to 2018. We've had them trying to keep apples to apples, inflate those costs into $2021, which is the midpoint of construction for our high school. These costs, I should also mention, these costs don't include site work or fields or those kinds of upgrades. It's just the square foot building component, because those site costs are just, they wide varieties and variations in cost across different sites. And at this point, I'll ask Dana to talk about the next 3 slides.
So we have certainly been sharing with you over the last year the development of these high school STEM signature programs. We envision a portfolio of programs that would allow students to begin their pathways to high skill and high demand regional careers. We've met with industry and higher education partners. Some of those industry partners are represented on this slide, as well as reviewed industry and occupational projection data. This afternoon, in fact, Dr. Cohn and I had opportunity to talk with Mr. Mark Quazano, who leads the learning and design and technology work at the Boeing Company, essentially, but certainly oversimplified. Mr. Quazano leads the training of Boeing employees, as well as advises the type of training and education that Boeing looks to when it's recruiting future employees. He was very complimentary of our vision for developing pathways to local high-demand careers. As well, he confirmed that all 4 of our signature program themes align to work at the Boeing Company. So not even across the whole region, but simply at the Boeing Company. And I think we've shared with you the 4 themes that we've come up with as medical and health careers, aerospace and advanced manufacturing, information and communication technology, and engineering and sustainability. Each of these programs, of course, have facility implications. We envision the medical and health careers situated in a modernized Everett High School vocational building, the aerospace and advanced manufacturing program as core to the remodeling of the Cascade High School Science Building, the Information and Communications Technologies program in remodeled classrooms to accommodate technology at Jackson High School, and an Energy and Sustainability program as part of the construction of Comprehensive High School number 4. This is an example of the type of pathway that we would be promoting for our students. That is, in our high school experiences, being able to thread together core academics and CTE experiences around a particular theme, and then launch into post-secondary options, whatever credential they decide to follow, certificate, associate's degree, and or baccalaureate degrees, bachelor degrees.
Thanks, David. This slide shows a possible 2018 capital bond schedule. We'd start right away with the high school, which we were already underway on the visioning and ed spec portion of it. And we'd move through the rest of the projects. You'll notice it's probably a 6 to 8 year program construction schedule. So resolution number 1164, this capital bond proposal is for $319.6 million. The debt service fund will be financed by property taxes over 15 to 20 years. We typically sell bonds in 3 and 4 increments as projects are constructed. Potential state financing assistance in the form of about $9.5 million. This would be for the 4 modernization projects on this proposal. And of course, we have a 60% supermajority required for voter approval. And with that, I open it up to discussions, questions, comments.
Thank you. I think just as a way to sort of help directors guide the discussion, I'd like to go back to slide 13 and just get director input on the package. This is something that we've, studied at our work session. We've looked again at our last board meeting. We've had some time to be out in the community with this and talk to folks about their support for different projects. Seems to be a lot of enthusiasm around the STEM signature programs. And I'd like to hear from each of you on your thoughts, if you feel this is the package we want to put forward to voters.
Well, I can just say that what I've heard from the breakfast conversations and from the parent engagement and also from other opportunities I've had to speak with people these last few months, the STEM projects, the signature programs, I am being blown away with the response of parents, and the communities are really liking the signature program. And as I mentioned before, several of the parents have said, how come we didn't do this before now? They're going over very well. They're being received very well in the community. And I think it's telling me that's one of the ways in which we should definitely delve into. We should definitely, jump right into that. So the time is right for Everett High School, Cascade Science, the vocational building, the science building, and even, building that in the Jackson High School, even though the program is just listed as 1.3, that's today's market. It may be even more if we wait a couple of years before we put that in. It needs to be done now. I do like the idea of building it in the comprehensive number 4 high school. That's definitely, we need to do that right now. So that's a definite plus right there. So I'm hearing a lot about that.
And I'm hearing too, if that's all right, at my one breakfast, and just about that South End growth. For example, Mike, I don't know if you know this, but they are putting 25 houses in Thomas Lake Estates where there are currently 4. So instead of having one house behind me, I get to have, I don't know how many. So it's those pockets of houses that are going in faster than we can build. And while portables are by no means fun things for us to buy, and having children that have been in portables, it's not a fun thing, but definitely heard the growth, the size of the schools down there, the houses that keep coming in, the community member who said, why can't we stop the growth until we can get the schools in? The families in the South End are definitely feeling the growth. I don't know how they'll vote, we don't know, but they're feeling the growth.
Several of the parents that I've talked to at the Woodside one said, why can't we stop the growth until we can get a handle on the number of schools?
That's what this parent said at my school.
As well. Why can't we do more and make the impact fees even higher than what they are?
I have a question around, we've kind of gone back and forth on the 36 classrooms, how to structure that piece of the bond. And I think we were all in agreement that we didn't want to move a bunch of used portables. And then we felt like building 36 new classrooms, well, it's expensive. And so we're sort of trying to find something in the middle, but adding more portables, 20 more portables after we, our last bond and levy had portables in it. I guess my question is, what other schools would be impacted by if we chose more permanent classrooms? I was looking for that original list of which schools, in addition to the ones listed.
Yes, yeah. Let me just switch presentations here real quick. I think we have that one. Whoops.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to make a comment that one of the elements that the Supreme Court is also being recognized for is the fact that they didn't fund the construction of classrooms. And so there's some speculation that there'll be some impetus for the state to provide some construction dollars. So as you contemplate permanent versus new, it may be in the circumstance where if you don't have it, you're first in line to get the classrooms. Don't know if portables are considered housing or not, but nevertheless, there may be some state funding down the road.
And before you sit down, remind me roughly if we don't have the classrooms to help reduce class size and with the enrollment growth, we're giving up state funding.
Without coming up with alternative staffing models such as foreign language in elementary schools and making sure that that's compatible with the rules, we were looking at about a little over $4 million a year that we'd be foregoing by not allowing.
And this was similar to Mukilteo's sort of kindergarten scenario.
Correct.
A couple years ago where they just didn't have the space
Yeah.
for it and they had to give up the funding for it.
We're asking them to delay compliance for 1 year until they fully fund our staffing. But again, we don't know the outcome, but there is that state-funded obligation that enters into your thinking of what the balance is between 36 new and portables.
Classrooms, the cost of that 20 portable classrooms and make more permanent structures at other schools and stuff.
I think that's what.
Let me see if I can find that one slide.
There we go.
This is the slide with a couple changes. So this has 36 permanent classrooms spread over 8 sites. You'll recall that price was $38 million. This also includes the parking expansion at Jefferson and Emerson that would be needed because of those portable classrooms being placed there. And in this slide, it also gives us an option of if we did not go with the Cascade High remodel of $6 million, we would be looking at a $330.6 million, excuse me. There's just some options to think about.
One piece of feedback that came from my meeting was the $1 million price tag for a classroom was very hard for the families at that meeting to understand. And so if we do go for more permanent classrooms, which does seem more reasonable to me, how do we communicate and not have people push back and say, why does it cost so much? I mean, it's $1 million a classroom. That's really hard, I think, for people to understand.
It is a big number, but that's what we're being told it costs today.
Yeah.
That includes, so when we build a four
It's all the
classroom,
list. Yeah, it's
right?
the list of everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's having that list, I think
We'll have to
helps.
message that out, yeah.
And so on this, you have the schools, but not the number of classrooms. Are they all equal? Or do some schools get more or less?
Some do get more and less, and I can get that information for you. I don't
Okay.
have it at my hands.
And are there certain?
Unless, Kelly, do you have that by chance?
Most of them, with a few exceptions, most are 4 classroom additions. There were a few, Emerson was a 6 classroom addition. We have them on the drawings, if we can pull those up.
That's okay.
We don't have those. So Emerson was 6, View Ridge was 8, and I believe the rest were 4. But I can get that for you.
$10 million more dollars.
$17.
11 more. 11 more. And then you take off Cascade High School remodel.
Cafeteria.
That's an option.
Well, that was to keep the number.
Yeah, trying to see.
That was to keep the number from escalating further. From being 336.
Yeah, and that's
Our max.
these are hard choices because that's a project that really needs to be done. And yet, should we get a new high school, we'd be moving a significant number of kids, students,
Out of the school.
out of the school.
And what is the number of classrooms? Like, we're focusing on the 36 classroom for K-3 class sizes, not knowing if the state is actually, and what the dollar figure is and the number of teachers that's going to bring. How did we arrive at that number, 36 classrooms?
You want to answer that one, John?
I think Voiceless Mike at previous described that this is a blend at this point of both enrollment growth and K-3 class size. We've been able to lower the required number of K-3 classrooms down as a result of being very diligent this year in terms of putting, so we used to talk about 54. That number is lower, but we're also looking at growth, because if we don't accommodate growth in the same period of time, we're in essence impacting K-3 class size.
I did mention that to the school I was at.
Does that sound?
Our
yeah.
bond might include an extra wing at the new school that's not even built yet, and Woodside that's not even remodeled yet, because of all the growth that everybody's seeing. And they didn't blink, and they said, oh, okay, because it is that just they see the growth that's happening, they see the need, and I think they like permanent classrooms, not portables.
Yeah.
Because it was, Penny Creek, it was built and then immediately added on to, so I think, it is that model that happens.
And it's advantageous to keep them at the local school, because if we were to go to another elementary school, you're again adding another $1.5 million in overhead of running a school, whereas, distributing these classrooms is a lower operating cost as well. And it's the same number of students, you just need more rooms.
So versus, you meant instead of building a new elementary school, which is roughly about the same cost, but only one location, not throughout the district.
Also means you have large elementary schools.
Yeah. Well, and it's.
Some value in keeping elementary school.
Yeah.
There's value, but at the same time, having been Penny Creek being one of the largest at times and very large, the way the building is structured, the way the programs are structured, the only time you saw all 750 kids was at the beginning of school and the end of school. Lunches are separate, buildings are separate, playgrounds are separate, and assemblies are separate. It takes a lot of juggling, and breakfast, it starts at 10, which is a side effect, sorry, my job, unintended consequence.
Going back to that number 36, there's no way to reduce that number 36. That's really where we're at.
We think so.
Yeah, that is where we believe the number should be.
And it's essentially the same cost as if you bought a portable, $1 million.
Portables are much less than a classroom.
Portables are generally about $220,000 a piece right now, to buy it, place it, hook all the systems up to it, provide furniture, equipment, and all that.
I want to lean towards portables because they're less money. And then I think back to the growth charts that we've been looking at for years and years and years now. And the accuracy of our growth projections year over year over year. And, portables are a great way to help with the fluctuation in enrollment. But we've overfluxed.
They've become permanent.
Yeah. at 115 in the district.
I have less heartburn, quite frankly, about increasing the number of permanent classroom spaces there. Overall, you asked us to comment on this slide, Caroline, and the only changes I would make is to boost the number of permanent classrooms. I think everything else shows that we are responding regardless of whether if the community fully understands it or not. Responding to the need, which is what I think the community would expect out of their board leadership. Where I have heartburn is between February and April. That's where I have greater pause.
And if I can clarify, you're talking about slide 13 on the other presentation.
Talking about
and adding in the 38
yeah, make sure I'm
million.
on the right. Make sure I'm on the right presentation here. Yeah. Caroline had asked us to comment on
Right.
slide 13.
Okay, I'm going to go back to slide 13.
You're saying having a February
Well, so
ballot
to
versus
finish my
April
thought,
ballot?
the delta appears to be $15 to $17 million between permanent and portable. If we go to 36 permanent classrooms,
Assuming you subtract the cafeteria cost.
I'm not suggesting we subtract the cafeteria cost.
Okay.
Then go ahead. What would the $336 million bond?
Understand that the cafeteria remodel has been an issue for Cascade for a while. First it was the bump out, then it was just a remodel, but there is an ongoing overcrowded situation there. With kids being able to be serviced, for lunch.
I talked to one parent who said her daughter doesn't even eat in the cafeteria because she can't get food in the cafeteria. Because the lines are too long and the setup is bad. But that's only one parent, one child.
It has some of the same problems, capacity.
But that's 22.8 million.
Yeah.
I do know that my son ate in the cafeteria, and he never really complained about not being able to eat in the cafeteria, but he's one to make sure that he eats in the cafeteria. There, he's not
Doesn't
gonna
matter where.
He's not gonna go forgo food at any time, no. But,
May I ask, Ted, you said something about April and February?
Well, I thought we were trying to button up this portion of the conversation
Yeah.
before, and I think the question was that Caroline had proposed is, where do we land on this bond package as presented on slide 13? That was my comments. I'm happy to comment on the other part when appropriate.
I'm still concerned about the price,
And what would you
336
suggest?
seems so high. But I don't know how the voters are going to feel about that number.
Well, and it's still under our, it's less than keeping a stable tax rate, if I remember correctly, because I think 340 gets us the max that we could keep a stable tax rate. Is that right, Jeff? So it's just $4 or $4,000.
We had a
million under
difficult
that, thank
time, we had a
Just
difficult
$4.
time in
I had a few zeros.
2014 passing a bond that was $294.
And every district did, and we were in recession. So 14, I think, can give us some pause, but I don't think, I think we can look at the community and what happened for us in 16 and, really look at what has changed and what might still be changing.
So in response to your question.
Yes.
340 was the outer boundary of trying to keep a stable tax rate. It pushes principal payments out a little later but we do have a model that would substantiate up to that level. I would prefer it be less, but
absolutely.
we can accomplish it.
But 336 puts us right up there.
I was wondering what it did to the tax rate, or if it was within our boundaries. That's been answered. I don't know, 320, 330, 336. I guess somehow the 330 a little bit more appealing to me.
329 in that case.
We get it down to 329.99.
All important. I'm in agreement with the permanent classrooms. I know we've just about beat that to death. But recognizing the revenue loss and the difference in costs, but more nominal difference in cost. Long term, I think it does make sense to to go with the permanent classrooms. So. I would be in favor of balancing permanent classrooms with taking away the cafeteria or postponing it, I should say.
Yes.
Postponing it. Postponing.
Just recognizing, as you pointed out, that some students will be moving. That will ease the crowding a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
But it's still out until 2023. So between now and 2023, we still have the condition still in place. It may not seem like a long time, but that's a whole class, those freshmen.
Their cafeteria wouldn't be, per the plan, isn't even being looked at until the high school is done. So it's not like they'd get their cafeteria before the high school, per this proposal.
If there's enough. Yeah.
Oh, and my guess is it would be cheaper now or within the next 2 years than it will be when this is scheduled.
Yeah. I think the thing, though, that I want to remind everyone is this is a subset of a much bigger list. And on that bigger list are a couple elementary schools that are in need of modernization. And we chose not to include those. They're bigger projects, but we don't get to do it all, unfortunately. So it sounds like we're a yes on permanent classrooms. And I guess I'd just like directors' opinions on whether to keep or remove Cascade cafeteria.
I personally would urge to keep it. I don't think it's ever going to be cheaper to do. And so I think it's something, and as we look at what we're doing for all of our high schools, should we be so fortunate that this should pass? We're going to have 4 high schools with 4 STEM signature programs, and the 3 existing high schools will have some type of improvements in addition to. That's why I like that. I think it shows an investment in our high schools across the board. I know it shows that certainly with the science building remodernization, but yep.
Just the cafeteria and the students that would eat there.
If it's a 4-1, I'm okay with that too.
cafeteria staying. I will go with what the majority.
The cafeteria remodel on the 20th.
It was the bump out. It was the bump out project
that's
that we
right.
ended up taking out. And then they came back and changed it, so it wasn't the bump out, but changed the inside layout. So they wanted it for quite some time. I mean, if you've been at Cascade and you're in that hallway, we're between the cafeteria and where the food line is, you can see how it gets very crowded. You can't pass through there at all during lunch.
I think I concur with Director Andrews in adding the additional classroom space. I mean, it feels very surreal right now because we're talking about $6 million, and to most people, that's just a whole lot of money. And yet, when we're looking at our bond package, it's not in relative numbers. But I think. You know, I'm still sensitive to just that increasing cost. So I guess I would opt to limit where we feel like it's not absolutely necessary.
I was hoping I didn't have to say anything. I think I am in it might not, it won't be $6 million 4 years from now, but I think bumping up against that max that we can handle is I think it just causes me pause, that keeping it at the 330 with the permanent classrooms, I think is, I think it's what I like.
That was adding the permanent classrooms, but not doing the cafeteria.
Correct, thank you.
Okay, so I think we have
Thank them, please.
Yeah.
For me too.
a decision on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Mike, thanks you as well.
Thank you very much for presenting.
Are we going to talk about timing? So I guess my feeling, first of all, Mike and Darcy and everyone who's put a lot of work into this is a heavy lift, and there's a lot of moving parts, and we change our minds, and you come back, and we change our minds, and you come back. And so thank you for your patience with us. I mean, it's, oh my. I do think we want to put ourselves in the best position to win, and of course that's, I mean, I don't think that's profound, but so I would continue with the visioning process, but I do have concern about a very compressed timeline in February as opposed to April. And I know that there are influencing factors on both sides of that decision. But I remember asking the question when we first started having these discussions about how many school districts run a bond 2 years after the fact, and we couldn't find a one out of 295 districts in the state 2 years later. And I do have a concern that we have not been able to fully demonstrate the success or the kind of the rising out of the ground results of the 2016 bond and levy that we passed. There's been some, but I don't know that there's been enough personally. And so I think we need to make a stronger case for stewardship, and I think we need the gift of time to be able to do that. That's how I feel personally. And so I think we need more than April. When I look at the timeline to share this message during the holidays, to have our partners be involved to help share the message, I don't know that we're equipped at this point to do it in our most effective way.
May I ask if you are the levy and bond going out in April, or the levy in February and the bond in April?
I would do the levy and bond in April.
I think you don't want to split them because
I know you wouldn't want to split them.
the cost of elections and voter fatigue.
Yeah, that's,
and,
I
yeah.
would not want to split them. That's why I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I think that would be not.
Yeah. But doing the levy in April puts us in some possible problems if the levy doesn't pass in April. Right. And so I think that it's a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely.
So I'm prepared to respond to the ramifications specifically for the educational programs and operation levy, and not specifically to the bond, because as Mike and I spoke, you know, starting a bond in April versus February is not significant. I would like to remind you back when we looked at the levy cliff diagram and how we communicated to our legislature that the need for an outcome early was critical, so that districts, as we commonly do, get our ballot on the February measure. And primarily, you have to remember that to do so, we have to plan for a $25 million cut. So if we delay until April, we're going to engage our Fiscal Advisory Council in identifying publicly what a $25 million cut looks like. And you can't really do it quietly, because you then have to begin building two budgets, one based upon a levy passing and one based upon a levy failing. And what that means is that by the time we get to March and the legislature concludes, we have until April 1 to notify our labor partner, the EEA, to the extent that and a rationale for making a $25 million cut. And more than that, we have to specify through a reduced educational program how many teachers, how many positions, just like we did, and I think some of you were on the Fiscal Advisory Council back in 2009 and 10. And we have to go through that measure because on April 10th, you would have to approve a reduced educational program. Otherwise, there'd be no way for us to lay off staff. And by doing so, we have to have RIF letters for all of the individuals on that list prepared to go out in late April. And then for the bond, for the levy measure to either win approval in April, we tuck that away, we stop going on two different budgets. We've probably already integrated our public into this possibility and why we're doing it. And then on May 15th, if the answer is no, we send out the RIF letters and we actually lay people off, and we have to wait the August deadline. So I couldn't urge you more to understand why school districts go out in February to avoid what we're backed up against, and that's state law. And this is a short legislative session. It will not move out from May 15th. We're going to have to lay off people on May 15th or be prepared to, awaiting the outcome of an April levy.
So I have a question. How is that different than if your levy failed in February?
If your levy failed in February, you would go into the same action and it would be a reality. You would have no other choice. You have to engage the public, and you would have to send out the RIF letters. But to do so, when we know that we have a 50% majority and the levies are, you're engaging the organization and our community in a very difficult task in a year in which we're bargaining with the union at the same time to consider what a RIF is and to lay it out and to meet the contractual language of presenting it to them, in essence, on April 1st.
Jeff, isn't it also, if we fail in February, we have April to go back? So we could use that time to educate the community about what $25 million looks like. And I don't know if that's happened, but if we fail in April, we can't go back until August. which
That's
means that
true,
we
but
can't, we've lost the hiring.
As Director Mason mentioned,
Yeah.
if you go out in February and you fail, it is an unusual circumstance. And for that to happen, you would be in a very drastic, radical mode, and we'd be demonstrating publicly why those deep cuts are necessary. To create the deep cuts, you know, kind of, I don't know how to say it, voluntarily or from a strategic standpoint, I think is going to be very, very challenging for us as an organization and to do so with our labor partners. So,
But I guess what I'm hearing you say is if you work to pass a levy in February and it fails, or you choose not to run one in February and you choose to run it in April, the actions are still the same.
we have to act as if the levy fails. There's no question about it, because we have to meet the deadlines for laying off people, and we have to know who they are, what the value is, and we have to present you with a plan that says, here's who we're going to lay off, here's who we're writing letters for. And I don't know how the community responds to that in the midst of a bond campaign. The district preparing to cut off what essentially is 250 educators.
How are the scenarios different than what it was in 2016 when we put forth the levy and the bond in April?
In 2016, it was a capital levy and a bond. It was not the M&O levy. That was in 2014.
So I think, you know, the struggle is the bond and the levy, you know, the advantages and disadvantages of the two running up against each other, because the importance of the levy is enormous in terms of our staff and operations. And yet, in my conversations, I'm getting a sense that we haven't done our due diligence in communicating to our community and our teachers and our parents the different components of the bond. For example, the STEM signature programs in the breakfast conversations are going over very well, but it's really the first time that most of these people have even had exposure, even though the work's been underway for well over a year or two. But you know, honestly, as a director, the first time that I really saw it laid out the way it was and included in the bond was at our October 17th work session. And so I'm feeling definitely that our community might really respond well to learning that information in a broader way than we've done to this date.
Well, I'm certainly not recommending that you run the bond in February. I'm urging you to understand the paramount importance.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I'm saying it's a challenge because because I feel like there isn't enough time on the calendar to explain the bond and the need for it by the February, and yet the flip side of the levy is dramatic.
So as you think about the bond and the date, and I don't know if you're going to decide that today, think about the negative impact of the public processes we'll be going through as you're asking the voters for money if you also delay the levy. And the second thing is understand that the state has not adequately communicated what they did to taxpayers by doubling up the levy and the bond. And they're going to receive a tax statement on February 14th, and to try to explain to them that in fact, this is just 1 year, and then your levy and our stable tax rate is going to go back down, is a part of the equation as well. So without further comment from staff, I would just urge that at a minimum, we run a levy in February.
So Jeff's arguing for you to consider there are three options, and you can't take any of the options off the table. But actually four, but the fourth one is foolishness. Run them both in February. Run them both in April, split them. Run one in February, run one in April.
Besides the fact that costs more, I think the community would get confused on why are we asking for money again? So they're
Hire out everybody.
yeah.
Bond comes second with a higher pass rate that might jeopardize.
There are 4 resolutions for you. In any event, you need to make the decision. File.
Comments? Options?
Can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think there is don't run a bond until 2019. I can think of a host of reasons why that's a bad idea. But to Jeff's previous point, we'll have a better understanding of the legislative outcomes, correct? There is an inflationary factor that works against that. I think there would be strong community support for a levy only. We will be further along in our capital development projects from the 2016 bond. We will have the opportunity to make the case over time. I know it's not desirable. I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but that is I don't think it's crazy either.
I just think that there is a real urgency to that new high school. And if we delay it until 19, it's not going to come out until 24. Jackson will be at what, 2,600 kids. There's just an urge. I mean, I'm making up a number. The urgency is there, and I just.
If there was any way to run a bond with just the high school and the STEM programs, then that would be great. But we know things break, and we know there's a need for all of the other maintenance items there. How do we do that? I don't know.
I just know the disappointment in some people when we didn't have the high school on the 16, which we couldn't have.
And I want to be clear, I don't see that as a great option. I'm not, 20 minutes ago, I was saying, put it all in. My concern is timing. That's my biggest concern. And have we had the time to make the case 2 years after?
2 years after.
Yeah.
And no construction.
Right.
Well, I think the newsletter that just went home has the newsletter that just went home.
The newsletter was great.
Has a lot of updates on all the construction for the last bond, and it looks.
By the way, that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's one piece of the education the district can do about where the money that the voters have done has gone already, or is going. Yeah, I read my mail.
We can always focus in on just the need for the high school. We've been talking about that all along. And it may not be the most desirable things, but reduce the whole package of it to just the high school and the STEM programs, and that's it. That gives the focus on the growth issues, and that's in the signature program.
But the new elementary school classrooms don't get the growth.
Say again?
Those new elementary school classrooms too for the growth.
I understand that, but if that's an extra 21 million that, we're a little bit concerned about getting voter approval, just talk about the high school.
Caroline, in your experience when you've gone to bond and levy seminars, my recollection of your reporting back is that at some point it's not about the number, It's about the projects.
Absolutely. It's about making sure that your community understands the needs and not focusing on the dollar amount, which is what we're doing right now. But you know, at some point there's a breaking point where a bond becomes too large, and none of us know what that is, which is the problem. It would be great to know that. They have done some research at the last election conference that was put on that I attended. You know, they did some around, they broke it out by district size, which was interesting and good. But really, you know, they did some testing of reducing bond size by, I can't remember, it's maybe a quarter or so. So they started with like a $300 million bond and took a quarter of it away and reran it. And the approval rating actually went down, not up, as you drop money. And so, so people, I think people, you know, my experience just over the years is people are more focused on making sure that we're being good financial stewards of their money and not increasing their taxes, and that we're choosing projects wisely that really meet the most important needs throughout the district.
So I feel like we have the case, whether it's 334 or 319, we have the case.
I agree.
And I feel very good about the case, and I could speak from the mountaintops on the case. I'm not concerned about that.
We have the case, but have we made the case to her?
So that's part one. I think the other part is I'm somewhat confident that the community, as they always have, would support an operations levy. Where I don't want to be is, should we consider something in a bond in February in addition to an operations levy, and the bond fails, that we're asked to come back in April? Because I think the community will have spoken, and I think we have to listen to that, and not just listen for 6 weeks and try to rally a bunch of support. That would cause me concern.
Yeah, I think the February election just doesn't allow time for us to make our case. And having been a part of levy and bond issues for the last 15 years, you know, times have changed. It's like when before the mail-in ballots, you had a lot more time to get your message out. But now with the mail-in ballots, you know, you've got the shortened time frame because ballots come out in January.
January 26th is
Yeah.
when they mail.
So you don't have that opportunity to message your community. You don't have the same time. And also last year, it became a different strategy, you know, much more of a public sort of outreach as opposed to prior campaigns, which takes more time.
Next year, the April date is the 24th, with ballots mailed on the 6th, which is during spring break. So we have all the way January, February, March. That gives us, you know, like 3 whole months where ballots get mailed.
But I'm liking your 2019 idea. I realize it pushes things out a year, but it also gives us time for that, the tax rate to come down. You know, from where this year it's going to be the increased state tax rate on top of our local, and that would drop, so that could be to our benefit. And it gives us a lot of time to build our case as such, to get the word out. There are some advantages to delaying it a year, I think. And I just worry about doing something that's not successful. Sends a message from the beginning that it's hard to backpedal on. So I don't know, maybe input from staff as to what pushing it out a year, implications of that. Other than it's another year of crowding and frustration and, yeah.
I'll see if I can be understood. About 4.5% per year escalation in costs.
Okay.
So 300 million plus at 4.5%. It's 12 million, something like that, per year. That's the dollar impact. I think that certainly the continuation of the crowded conditions is important, as well as the delayed implementation of the STEM programs, as well as the K-3 class size reduction opportunity. That's kind of it. I think that we've been communicating about the need for the high school for 3 to 4 years. I think we've done a lot of communication around that. I think the K-3 class size the same way. That was, K-3 class size was on the, I think the 2014 package. I think the most recent kind of big thing is the STEM, and that has a fairly strong support apparently in the community for it. So I was just kind of pointing out some things about that. I think the need for continued modernizing of our high school space is really important. And that we've been talking about for ages with our modernization schedule. Those are the implications I see.
Well, at this time, we're running over. It's obviously a fairly important conversation to have. And I'm trying to figure out the most appropriate way to move forward. I don't think, does not sound like we're ready to make a decision tonight. I don't know how other directors feel.
I like the idea of drafting 4 resolutions. I mean, that's.
But I guess my question is it sounds like maybe we need to have a little more conversation around this. And I'm not sure when that might happen.
WASDA conference. WASDA conference together for 3 days. But don't make any decisions. It's just talk time. You get to talk with lots of other school board members. You get to talk with the bond people. Talk with all the other folks.
Good luck.
Eric, quite a few districts going out for bonds in February or April.
Does that sound good?
Yeah. But I would still draft up.
Or was, well, 3. I mean, you're going to do the levy.
Have them ready to go.
Yeah. Well, there's no reason, I'm not hearing that you want to do a levy in April, though. I'm not really hearing that.
Say again?
I'm not really hearing that you want to do a levy in April.
We're going to do them both at the same time. But I don't think we've decided April or February.
I think we want to do them both at the same time.
Well, not if you're going to delay one of them a year. Fundamentally, I think you run into such huge problems in putting a levy on the ballot in April that really isn't a good option for you because of the angst that you create in the community around layoffs, risks.
But because we
And
have
the risk
to,
you take.
Because we have to notify them while we're educating them about asking for more money.
Correct. We have to notify the EEA by April 1st.
And that's a big confusion.
So,
And then you have to have the plan ready to go in order to notify all the staff that you would lay off if it fails.
I think,
Right. That doesn't mean you're going to lay off anybody.
yeah, I think the 3 options I'm hearing are to run both in February, run both in April, or run a levy in February and a bond at a different time out in the future.
Or, because if we postpone it over a year, then you don't have to present anything.
Are those the options that we're considering, or are there others?
That's it. That's what we're considering, and at that 336. Or 3:30?
3:30. Yeah.
You landed on
3:30 price.
permanent classrooms, no cafeteria.
Correct.
Oh, right.
Yes.
After hearing about this, we have been informing our community for a long time about the need, the growth, the need for more classrooms, the need for another school. Just how have we been explaining this, to such a great detail as, 330, whatever the number is. But at some point, you have to say the need is there. And I know it doesn't give us much time in February. Plan for it. I know the burdens, because based on the people, doing all of the work. At some point in time, we have to come. The need is there. It's great.
I think we need to move this conversation to another time, continue it at another time. I appreciate everyone's input and willing to share your thoughts on this, and to Darcy for your presentation tonight. So with that, we are moving on to new business, and I believe Mr. Fleckenstein has two policies for us to review.
Yeah, well, good evening. The proposed revisions to Board Policy 2123, Health and Physical Education Program, are presented tonight for the Board's consideration in response to the passage of House Bill 1235 that added new language to Chapter 28A 230 RCW regarding physical education programs. The changes to the RCW and its potential impact on Board Policy 2123 and its related procedure also prompted our review of related Board Policy 2335, Health, Family, Life, AIDS, and Sex Education. Our analysis of both board policies determined that Policy 2335 was specific to one aspect of our district's health curriculum and has a direct relationship to the scope of Board Policy 2123, Health and Physical Education Program. Therefore, for the board's consideration, we propose to consolidate Policy 2335 into our existing Board Policy 2123. The proposed revision to Board Policy 2123, Health and Physical Education Program, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the Superintendent's Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Do directors or student representative have any questions or comments regarding Policy 2123, the consolidation? With that, we will move it to second reading. Thank you.
Also this evening, the proposed deletion of Board Policy 2335, Health, Family, Life, AIDS, and Sex Education, is presented for the board's consideration. In connection with the proposed revisions to Board Policy 2123, Health and Physical Education Program, presented 2 minutes ago, as presented, the language contained in Policy 2335 is to be moved in its entirety into Board Policy 2123. If approved, the need for Board Policy 2335 would be eliminated. The proposed deletion of Board Policy 2335, Health, Family, Life, AIDS, and Sex Education, has been reviewed by legal counsel and the Superintendent's Cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
Do directors have any questions regarding the deletion of Policy 2335? Hearing none, we will move that as well to second reading.
Thank you.
Okay, and we are at upcoming agenda items. Dr. Cohn.
Yes, item 14.1 is a special meeting scheduled for November 14. It is the first of the three formal superintendent evaluation sessions this year. The content for that meeting has been posted so that you may enjoy yourselves reading it between now and that evening. I would like to devote a little bit of time that evening to presenting the results of bargaining with the Teamsters. And I'm wondering whether or not that meeting is scheduled to start at 4:30. I'm wondering whether or not you all might be able to come 15 minutes early, 4:15. On the 14th, yes.
I know I can. Yes. I can't, but I'm pretty sure I can. I don't schedule it.
You all right? All right, so we'll pop a little closed session in there for 15 minutes and get that on your calendars.
You'll send the calendar.
We absolutely will. Debbie can't wait to use her new board calendar system. Thank you. November 17 is the start of the WASDA annual conference, and as far as I know, you'll be arriving on the Friday. I think, are you signed up for an early bird? No, nobody signed up for an early bird, I don't think. Okay, so we're all there on Friday through Sunday, if we all last that long. And Druvic's going to be with us on Friday through the end of the student gathering that he goes to, while you all go to a non-student gathering. And yeah, and I think we are presenting several sessions, and we will get you all updated and ready to go. Joyce and I are maybe a little bit behind our own schedules to get those things ready, but we definitely will
Is there an
get
expectation
you briefed.
that we go to each other's presentations?
No.
A lot of districts do that. Like
You're welcome to.
the whole board there just in support. I wasn't sure what
You all have not established that expectation. If you'd
Social,
like to, you
emotional
can.
support.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, I won't be there on that Sunday.
All right.
I won't as well.
All right.
I've already indicated that.
Okay. We're good. Good. Item 14.3 is your next regular meeting. It's scheduled for the 21st of November. You've got a 24 credit plan update. The two policies that you just reviewed are coming up for a second reading. You've got a number of general operating business items and a host of resolutions to choose among. We intend to present you the State Counselor of the Year and I believe the School of Distinction at the 21st meeting for recognition. Remind me, December for the School of Distinction. All right, I'll take that out of this item right now. So you've got State Counselor of the Year, and then we'll do the School of Distinction in December. That is your set of upcoming agenda items.
Thank you. See, section 15.0, we do not have an executive or closed session tonight, so we move to the next section, 16.0, which means we are adjourned.